Hello, everyone. It's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I hope everyone is doing okay today. I gotta be honest, feeling kind of rough today, but I definitely wanted to do this story, and there are two other stories behind this that I really want to do. Uh, so let's do the news. And there is big news. There's very big news. At least I think it is. Let me check my sound. Always check your sound, just to be on the safe side, because you never know. You may end up doing 30 minutes just talking, giving the best performance in the history of performances that no one else hears. All right, good. So, back in December 7th, 1941, Japanese attack Pearl Harbor. Now, I'm going to make a case here in this video. For the most part, the history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it damn sure rhymes. And we're in the tune to have history that is going to rhyme like nobody's business, in the tune of the United States creating a pretext to attack Iran. I've said it, going over a year, and each stone along the way I've pointed it out. And we have another stone that's fallen in a whisper that nobody else is screaming about. At least I don't think so. Let's go back to this. December 7th, 1941, Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. The day after that, a thunderous barn burner of a speech by FDR in the well of Congress, all of these people around, waiting, looking for the president. Tell us something. Make us feel okay. They've just attacked our nation. What are we going to do? Take a look at this. If I was there, I'll be one of these people clapping and screaming.
Mr. Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, of the House of Representatives, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at the solicitation of Japan, was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific. The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. I regret to tell you that very many American lives have been lost. In addition, American ships have been reported torpedoed on the high seas between San Francisco and Honolulu. As Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, I have directed that all measures be taken for our defense.
Now, if you remember correctly, after the speech, the Declaration of War, the famous Declaration of War, Hitler declares war on the United States. Now, Hitler didn't have to declare war on the United States. Yes, Germany and Hitler were allies, but he didn't have to do that. He did it. In which case, the United States got involved in the Pacific. In the war with Germany. Here's the thing. The United States at the time was in a Lend-Lease program with Britain, weapons and all this other stuff, because we, for the most part, was going to be the arm and the arm of the war. We weren't necessarily directly involved in the war, but we were directly involved in the war, giving materials and aid to Britain and the Allied forces. The dirty secret here, history always stops at a particular point. When they were talking about this war, off the time, Japan just attacked us. We weren't doing anything wrong. We were sitting there selling oranges by the side of the street, and bam! out of nowhere, hit by a car. Weren't doing anything wrong. Here's the catch. We knew we were fucking around with Japan. It wasn't, and this is not pity for Japan because Japan had a murderous rampage in China. I'm just saying it wasn't like we were not involved in any kind of conflict with Japan. We had a trade embargo on Japan, and in that trade embargo, we were essentially strangling them of certain oils and materials and metals and so forth. Japan was an industrial nation. They used that industry just like the United States used that industry to maintain a certain domination over areas nearby. If you're going to starve them of utilities or materials, you're going to grind their economy to a halt, which meant that Japan was in the situation where they had to do something. Now, the United States understood this. They understood this. And they also understood that Japan may attack because of it. We were prepared for it. To some degree, we incentivized it. Take a look at this. U.S. economic warfare provoked Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. Now, I just want to make the point that there was an economic war against Japan. The context to which Japan attacked us wasn't necessarily, oh my God, we're just standing there and blam, out of the blue. Now, whether you want to say that the economic embargo on Japan was right or wrong, that's besides the point of my argument. I am making the point that it was not a situation where the United States was not involved in what was taking place and Japan just accidentally attacked us. We were aware of it, and we were instigating certain behaviors that we knew would create a crisis in Japan. This is a communique. I've been trying to evaluate whether or not this communique is exactly what it is, but it looks right. Look at this part. If by these means Japan could be, I don't know what this word is, to commit an overt act of war, so much the better. At all events, we must be fully prepared and accept the threat of war. They understood what was going on. There was an embargo. They understood. I'm just trying to nail down this point home. The behavior that we take, there are consequences for that behavior. And sometimes the consequences are not necessarily shared with the American public. And things that take place are put through a very specific filter of us. As if what we're doing is absolutely right. What we're doing it for the rights of freedom and justice and everything else. And we were just doing the best thing that we could. Which is the way that JFK phrases it when he talks about going to the moon, even though it was a military capacity for that, or there were militaristic reasons that they were going to the moon. Same thing with us. FDR is being cagey. FDR is being cagey. So when I see this, I realize there's a larger context to this stuff that exceeds what he's saying.
To comport with what the Iranian people really want them to do. I'd like to update you on the progress we're making to advance the president's Iran policy. It has been almost 2 months since President Trump announced our withdrawal from the Iran deal, and a little over 1 month since Secretary Pompeo laid out a roadmap for achieving a better deal. The Secretary outlined a clear and compelling vision for a better future for the Iranian people. This future can only be realized, though, if Iran meets 12 demands to become a normal country. Normal countries don't terrorize other nations.
I realized that my sound was off as I was doing that. So let me explain what I was trying to explain in the other one when my volume was down. This is Brian Hook. Brian Hook is giving a briefing on Director of Policy. And it is the weirdest or most Orwellian speech that I guess a person can give. Ultimately, Brian Hook is explaining that the United States policy is essentially, we're putting sanctions on everybody. If Iran is not going to meet what we want them to meet, we're putting sanctions on them. Now, think back to what you just saw from the standpoint of FDR and Japan, the context that was set, the context that was left out of Japan needing certain things. And you can make, again, whether this was right or wrong for them to do, I'm making a point that it's irrelevant. I'm trying to get across this larger context of there was something taking place that instigated the behavior of one of the parties. Well, Hook is going to lay out something similar. Now, you can even take this back to World War One. I can't think of the name of it. Austro-Hungarian Empire, where they were trying to get Serbia to take on certain demands that Serbia in no way would never take on, because no nation would take certain demands on. They wanted to have like a military tribunal within the country itself, where having one country's law supersede another. It was nonsense. They did it, though, purely because they wanted to instigate and provoke a war. In the same way that the United States, you can make an argument, was doing that to Japan in order to provoke a war. They understood that there was going to be a provocation. They did it for that very specific reasons. I can't say that. I can't say they did it for the very specific reason of a provocation, but they understood that a provocation was likely based on what they were doing. Same thing here. Same thing here. Listen to what the sanctions are and listen to what... Two things. He is trying to tell Iran what Iran should do. That's bizarre, especially after the United States pulls itself out of an international treaty. And two, sanctions on everybody. I'm putting sanctions on you and you and you and you. All of you are going to have sanctions because all of you are wrong. I'm the only party in this that's right. That sounds weird, but that's what he's planning on doing. Let's take a listen. I'm not going to interrupt. I just wanted to explain because I think I went through a minute with nobody hearing what I was saying. Again, saying the greatest thing that had ever been said at that moment. And only I could hear it.
Proliferate missiles and impoverish their own people. As Secretary Pompeo has said, this new strategy is not about changing the regime. It is about changing the behavior of the leadership in Iran to comport with what the Iranian people really want them to do.
Did you hear what he just said? That's utter lunacy. This guy's a fucking idiot. And the people who put him up to say it. We in the United States is going to force the Iranian government to behave in the best interests of their people. Who the fuck is deciding who's in the best interest of their people? Are you telling me that you and Trump and Pompeo and Michael Bolton, that maniac, that psychopath, that you all know what is in the best interest of the Iranian people? This is nonsense already. This is nonsense. These people aren't serious. These people aren't fucking serious at all. I'm sorry. I want you to hear it. It's just aggravating to me to hear this. In this country, us, right-wingers, are going to make a determination on what's best for the people in Iran. Think about what's being said here. This is utter lunacy. I'm not necessarily saying that the theocrats in Iran are great, but why are those theocrats there? Why are those theocrats there? Fucking BP and the CIA. This is aggravating. This is aggravating.
A key part of our strategy is a campaign of maximum economic and diplomatic pressure. The first part of our sanctions will snap back on August 4th.
It's economic terrorism. Call it what it is. Call it what it is. Do you realize that during the Iraq campaign? Now, here's another flashback. Do you remember when that horrible person, Madeleine Albright, that they sit there with as if the person is perfectly okay? These people are goddamn genocidal maniacs. They believe that just because there's some distance between the decisions that they make and the actions and the consequences of those decisions, that the people are somehow absolved of blame for that. She killed hundreds of thousands of kids. Hundreds of thousands of kids. The Democrat. The most sensitive one. These sanctions is almost like a callback to what was taking place during Bill Clinton just before they attacked Iraq. And I'm talking about Bush attacked Iraq, but the policy for the most part of economic pressure, military pressure, has been consistent. So I'm keep going.
These sanctions will include targeting Iran's automotive sector, trade in gold, and other key metals. Our remaining sanctions will snap back on November 6. These sanctions will include targeting Iran's energy sector and petroleum-related transactions and transactions with the Central Bank of Iran.
Listen to this. Sanctions on essentially stopping gold from going into the country, metals from going into the country. Do you realize that in this, he even says, look, we're not attacking medicine and food. Oh, good for you, thanks. We're just attacking oil and metal. Oil and metal. That's all we're putting an embargo on. That's an economic war. And just so we're very clear, just so I'm specific, the embargo Roosevelt and his subordinates knew they were putting Japan in an untenable position and that the Japanese government may well try to escape the stranglehold by going to war. Having broken the Japanese diplomatic code, Americans knew, among many other things, the foreign minister Todo had communicated Ambassador Nomura on January 31st. Commercial and economic relations between Japan and third countries, led by England and the United States, are gradually becoming horribly strained that cannot endure it much longer. Consequently, our empire, to save its very life, must take measures to secure raw materials of the South Seas. Now, I'm looking for the metals because this was similar. Essentially, they were putting a stranglehold right here. In the late 19th century, Japan's economy had grown to industrialize rapidly. Because Japan had few natural resources, many of the burgeoning industries had to rely on imported scrap tin, copper, bauxite, rubber, and petroleum. Without access to such imports, many of them which came from the United States or from European colonies in Southeast Asia, Japan's industrial economy would have ground to a halt. By engaging in intentional trade, however, the Japanese had built a moderately advanced industrial society. I'm making the point to you that in the same way, there was an embargo on certain products. What's taking place here is the same. They're embargoing the things that the country needs to exist. Trying to provoke a certain action in the same way you can make a case that Japan was to some degree provoked to action. And again, I don't mean provoked in a negative sense. I just mean provoked in the sense of we must do this, otherwise our country comes to a halt. Let's let him finish. There's another part to this that I want him to hit on.
After leaving the deal, Secretary Pompeo and Secretary Mnuchin decided to create joint teams of senior officials to visit every region of the world. These teams were launched on June 4th and have already visited 13 countries in Europe and East Asia. Our diplomatic teams from State and Treasury are bringing with them a message of cooperation and coordination. Many countries around the world share our interests in countering terrorism, halting the proliferation of missiles, and promoting peace and stability in the Middle East.
This speech is lunacy. He can't be serious. He can't be serious. I hear this and I think to myself, there's no way he can be serious. How is he saying this with a straight face? Hey, the picture I'm holding up right here, that was us, buddy. We did that. That doesn't look like stability to me. That looks like something else. It looks like you're torturing another human being. Who was put in prison for that? It was against the law. Bush said he broke the law. Nobody was put in prison for that. You have destabilized that region of the globe, or we have destabilized that region of the globe. No consequence. And now you're talking about Iran as the culprit of violence in this region of the world. You have lost your fucking mind. You have allied yourself with terrorists in Syria. You have allied yourself with a theocratic regime that you don't seem to have any issues with at all, Saudi Arabia, who chop off heads and hands, crucifies others, and with a straight face, you give the speech. I'm going to advance the speech to 9 minutes when they ask him, hey, do you think this may have negative repercussions for the oil markets? Because after all, what is Iran going to do, and what are some of these other nations going to do when you try to go about your plan of preventing oil from going through? You heard him. He said, we're going to try to prevent oil. How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? And in preventing oil, in fact, let me show you, where is it? 9 minutes and 52 seconds. Because I want to show you what Rouhani said about this. Because Rouhani, being sane, at least in this capacity, is right. Not only have they started a trade war with people who are allies, the JCPOA, the other countries around the world have stayed with that deal. The United States is the only one that's balked and walked out. Again, the stubborn kid took his ball and went home. The other countries stayed with it. You are the odd man out, and nobody in their right mind is going to make a deal with you under these terms. But I suspect you know
Back
that.
to the energy sanctions. Our goal is to increase pressure on the Iranian regime.
Arabia to increase oil production by 2 million barrels. Mm-hmm. Can you please give us, have the Saudis agreed to that, number one? Number two, what do you think the market reaction is going to be to that? Would it push down prices, and will it make up for the shortage coming up? And number two, is that 2 million barrels per day?
Well, I'd refer you to the White House for a specific readout on the Saudi reaction to the phone call the president had with the king. Our goal, with respect to the energy sanctions, our goal is to increase pressure on the Iranian regime by reducing to zero its revenue from crude oil sales. Now,
Right there. That goal is nonsense. That goal is nonsense. How are you going to do that? Is China and Russia on board for that? They're not going to be on board for that, which means that the goal is zero. It's nonsense. It's utter nonsense. It's simply nonsense. If the very next question, she should have screamed nonsense the moment that you said that, because Russia and China would never be on board with what you just said. It's a fucking idiot. Let's keep going. I can't believe this.
We are working to minimize disruptions
You're not serious.
to the global market. But we are confident that there is sufficient global spare oil production capacity.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. India and I believe Turkey have explicitly said that they will continue to import Iranian oil. Could you be precise about?
Even right there, India and Turkey has said we are going to continue to do this because the United States is a rogue state at this point. And yet we're not stopping. So even taking China and Russia out, the major economies of India and Turkey have said, no dice, buddy. We're still taking the oil. You can go fuck yourself. It means that your strategy is dead on arrival, because at the very least, major economies around the world have said, go fuck yourself. It's amazing. This guy's not serious at all. These people are maniacs.
What kind of consequences they will face, or that corporations and banks will face if they do this?
We are not looking to grant licenses or waivers, because doing so would substantially reduce pressure on Iran. And this is a campaign of imposing pressure. And so we are not looking to grant licenses or waivers broadly on the reimposition of sanctions, because we believe pressure is critical to achieve our national security objectives. We are prepared to work with countries that are reducing their imports on a case-by-case basis. But as with our other sanctions, we are not looking to grant waivers or licenses.
All the countries of the world need to call this bluff. Period. How long are you going to stay under the thumb of a failing empire? Explain that to me. How long? Issues like this. show when an empire is falling and failing and they're clutching as much as they can to the things that are going in different directions, and that is literally what this is. The British Empire attacking, what was it, Egypt or somewhere. The Roman Empire not being able to hold on to all of its interests. Same thing. Economically, going downhill. And the only thing you got left is $1 trillion a year military budget in which all of that money is being wasted. 70% of the globe, military. Think about that shit. That's fucking ridiculous. You can't even make sure people have health care. You have people shitting on the streets in California. But $1 trillion a year in military. And this dunderhead is out there talking about lowering the number to 0 when, as the press kind of makes out to him, multiple countries have said they're not getting on board for this. You've been isolated. You. Isolated. This is utter nonsense. One last clip. I want to show you the response of Rouhani. All of these documents are below, by the way. Let's see. All right, let's start it from here.
Our goal, with respect to the energy sanctions, our goal is to increase pressure on the Iranian regime by reducing to 0 its revenue from crude oil sales.
When they say they will not allow Iran's oil to be exported, it means that the oil of the entire region will not be exported. How is it possible that Iran's oil can't be exported, but the rest of the regions can? It seems they don't understand what they are saying when they say Iran will not be allowed to export even a drop of oil. Okay, if they can do it, then do it and see the result.
And as a result, too, there have been calls from Iran's Revolutionary Guard to block the Strait of Hormuz, used by Gulf countries for exports. The strait is controlled by Iran to the north and also by Oman in the south. The US Navy, though, has already reacted by saying it's willing to provide security for trade in the region.
Did you hear that? The US military has said it was willing to provide assistance for trade in the region. They're using our tax dollars to send the Strait of Hormuz. Iran controls it. The United States is talking about taking it. This is fully an issue that the United States precipitated.
We asked Steve Keen, a professor of economics at Kingston University, whether the conflict could now escalate.
This particular
You don't have to ask Steve Keen that. You can use your own goddamn eyes. You can use your own perspective of history and say, yes. Yes. One country is trying to get another country to do something that that country and no country would ever do. What I want is for Americans to have a previous context of the behaviors that of other countries. What I am happy about is that there's additional media so that the information that people get is not funneled into the small, narrow way of just a very specific sliver perspective of events. I'm saying we need to have a larger context of events. And whatever the issue was back then to World War II, I would wager, I don't necessarily, again, whether you say the United States was right or wrong for blockading Japan, and again, Japan was not, they were fucking bloodthirsty in the areas of China. So this is not pity for Japan. This is more so trying to just make this very specific point. What Trump is doing here is trying to provoke a war. That's what he's doing. In the same way that Roosevelt, at the very least, understood that Japan was going to be inclined to attack, Donald Trump knows that trying to starve Iran in this way is done as a precipice or as a pretext to a larger conflict. So, all of those people, when he came out of the deal, and I screamed, he's trying to start a war. And you had HA saying, no, man, he's not trying to start a war. He's starting a war. He's starting a war. If all of those people were on their ass about Hillary Clinton, they should be on their ass about this. OCD alert again. The image not lined up with the left side of your camera. Only way to fix Middle East involvement is to get off oil. Agreed. Check your sound, for fuck's sake. Joel says. I checked it, Joel. It was all of like a minute. I got it. If anyone thinks that MOC is the way to effective regime change in Iran, you mean MEK, not MOK. Balthazar, this is just in. Democrats went to war with alien race because they don't want to give Trump credit for peace talks through an affair with an alien princess. Hashtag dead. Hashtag dead. I love that. It's fucking Trump derangement syndrome. Look, I just wanted to make a point about this. We've been in the Middle East destroying one country after the next, after the next. We spent $20 trillion to do it. Not to mention 1 million Iraqi lives, 4,000 American lives, and how many other people who died in all of the conflicts throughout that region of the world shot by American soldier. Leveraging the bravery of the kids, the women, the men, the children in this country that believe that they are doing something better for a higher reason, leveraging that to kill others. It needs to stop. It needs to stop. And I understand Trump supporters, think he's something different. He's not something different, I'm sorry. He has certain allegiances and alliances that he prefer to deal with more than others. He has been on Iran's ass militarily. You don't bring in Bolton and Pompeo, two war hawks, two chicken hawks, if you want to call it, into the administration if you're not necessarily looking to do some killing with those two. I mean, let's be honest. Call it what it is. So the question becomes, all of those Trump supporters who are hopped up on Hillary Clinton starting a third world war, I agree with you. Congratulations, I agree with you. What about this? What about this? Fucking be honest. Silver went to prison. Trump is more of the same in terms of U.S. policy. He is exactly the same. You have a reality show host. You say, here, reality show host, here's your policy. Okay, well, you need me to sign. I don't know dick about this. I only know about reality shows. Fine, where you want me to sign? Dump the Trump. Look, I don't think they should have been with the Trump and to begin with. But understood the argument about that woman starting a third world war. What is Trump about to do? Is it making America great, using his resources in order to destroy Iran? Because I guarantee you that's where it's going. That's where it's going. Someone convinced him he could have more Trump towers in Iran so he shouldn't go to war. And by the way, this nonsense, he's so bad at it. It's not even good politics. It's horrendous politics. You had to come out and say, hey, we're not trying to effect regime change. The very fact that you have to say we're not trying to effect regime change probably gets across that you're trying to effect regime change. It's fucking aggravating. Most Americans couldn't find Iran on the map. Brits wouldn't be any better. For some reason, I would hope Brits would be better, but maybe not. I've listened to Galloway's call-ins, and maybe not. The DNC still wants Oprah to be the 2020 candidate. Ruben Garcia, I still want the DNC to lose. But he's talking about a war. And the sad part is that JCPOA, that was the thing that literally was keeping us from a larger conflict. Trump has found a way to alienate the United States from all of his friends and an overstep of power without necessarily tending to the devices inside the country itself and the organs of the country. He's allowed this country to be weak and never more. It's embarrassing. Trump can't write a 5-minute wrestling script, much less run a country like the United States. The sad part is, it was like 60, 70% of Americans thought he was incompetent. It's not like the country didn't know. The country didn't have a choice. Not a good one anyway. All right, I want to end this. This one was long, but again, I wanted to give context. Sorry for the sound issue. I think it was only like a minute. No, MOK in Europe hardcore anti-Iran group. Okay. I thought you meant the MEK. There's a group called the MEK where you have people, congressmen supporting because they're like a an opposition group in Iran, but it's like an opposition group that has little to no support, but the United States loves them. That's what I thought you were talking about. All right, I'm going to end this here. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, guys.